Good evening. And I'm going to apologize for a slightly hoarse voice. I'm not sick. I'm suffering from tremendous, a serious allergy. I recently adopted a rescue kitten, and it's killing me, right? I wake up in the morning, and it looks like I've been boxed in the face, and then I sort of have asthma attacks slowly as I get into the evening, etc. So hopefully my voice will last the 20 minutes that we have together. So one of the things that I really enjoy about Heavy Chef is about bringing real-life experiences and making them real to do good. And tonight what I'm going to share with you is based on the experiences that I have. And it's based on what is rapidly becoming a personal purpose. You know, I come from a working class family, and when I started earning a salary, my purpose was defined by material things. I wanted a cool car, a cool house, cool suburb, and lots of cool stuff. Then it evolved, and it was about creating some form of wealth that could make me comfortable as I grow older. And as I've matured, I've realized that perhaps the thing that really drives me is to play a role in making South Africa a far better place, in uplifting economic prosperity, and perhaps using the knowledge that I've gathered over the last couple of years to address the big unemployment problem that we have. And it's a sincere purpose. I don't think I've properly formulated it, but it's certainly what drives me. So what I'm going to share with you is what I'm talking about across the world at the moment, around how I think the future of work potentially looks like. But before I get into that, I want to bring it back to this modern world that we live in, right? And this is an example of some of the phenomenal startups that I've engaged with or worked with over the last 18 months. These are amazing companies that are changing people's lives as soon as they touch the ground. From companies like Zipline in East Africa that are delivering life-saving products over a couple of days a couple of hours as opposed to a couple of days, to 3D, 4D printed robots that get injected into your body to repair damaged heart valves and blood and arteries, etc. My favorite one at the moment is a company called Beyond Verbal, based out of Tel Aviv. They were born in the world of security. And what they essentially have developed is an app that listens in on your conversations. It's delivered to you via your phone, and then it picks up changes in the tone of your voice. And it will drop you an SMS to say you're about to have a heart attack. And it's amazing. The accuracy levels are in excess of 90%. It's a collaboration between Cleveland Clinics, Harvard, and this security company. It's pretty phenomenal. And we get wowed by these organizations, you know, and the coolness and the amazingness of these entrepreneurs and the technology. But the reality is that before this gets adopted in the real world of business, it's got to pass this test. It's a simple equation that has to be addressed. And probably to understand the equation, I need to flip it around the other way, which says that to really become a truly exponential organization, you've got to leverage these technologies to unlock exponential growth in the business, that's the G, to create new forms of revenue through innovation of products and services, exponential productivity by reducing the cost of doing business, so you produce your same product, high quality product, but at a low cost point to your competitors, which is a great strategy, by the way. And then the X, exponential experience, where you get your customers to come back, stay longer, and spend more. That's the magic. That's ultimately what you want to solve for with these technologies and these products that we're addressing. And that is only possible when the capex of the machine becomes cheaper than the opex of the human. So when you think about it in the right order, it says that when the capex of the machine becomes cheaper than the opex of the human, we unlock this phenomenal ability to increase revenues inside businesses, reduce the cost of doing business, and uplift the experience your customers have with your business. And you do this through the digital dividends that you get from these new amazing technologies. And by doing that, you become a truly amazing exponential organization. But when we're talking about capex of machines and opex of humans, this is the next conversation that comes up. So what about our jobs? Right? And this is an emotional conversation because we can see the technologies that are going to take our jobs away, but we don't have the imagination to see the technologies that are going to create jobs that don't exist yet. Right? But why this is very emotional is that our jobs define our relevance in society to some extent. It gives us our psychological pleasure. It's how we sustain ourselves. And also, you've probably got kids. Most of you have got kids. What are they going to do? How are you going to prepare them for this? And what about the teams that you're responsible for? This is a deeply emotional conversation. And what happens now at the moment, what I'm seeing across the region all the way into Europe, in the Northern Hemisphere, is that every single executive, people sitting in this room, are talking about this future of work. So we're trying to get our companies ready by thinking about where are we going to work, what kind of work we're going to do, and how are we going to do this work. Are we going to be replaced by machines, or are we going to be augmented by machines? This is a massively complex conversation. And I'm presenting you with one dimension, but there's multiple of dimensions that have to be addressed. Everything from learning to culture to people that we heard about. But let me just surface at a 20,000-foot view the things that are shaping how we have to think about work and the environments that we're in at the moment. The first one is that we're living in this world of what I refer to as timeplosion, the implosion of time. We all talk about work-life balance. It doesn't exist. Right? And even those that preach it don't achieve it, right? And so we're living in this world where we are now producing, we're wanting to do a lot more with less time. That image on the left side of the screen is a 15-year-old whiskey that was produced in 24 hours. And it's going to be distributed in South Africa. It's going to be used again at a function in about a month's time. I'm going to say that again, a 15-year-old whiskey that was produced in 15 hours. There's companies and services like Duolingo that gives you a semester of learning in 34 hours, right? And this also plays out into the world of business. CEO tenures are dropping dramatically. If you're looking at an average tenure worldwide of 4 years for a CEO, and if you take out Chinese CEOs out of that equation, that tenure drops even further. If you go play your golf or ride your bike, you will do a weather check and get a 15-minute view on the weather for the next 4 hours to make sure you can maximize your time while having pleasure, right? So we talk about work-life balance, but we're creating this environment of timeplosion. We are money-rich and time-poor, and we are bringing it onto ourselves. So that's the first thing that's certainly shaping how we work and how we consume. The second one is this construct of the work ecosystem. Jobs are being separated from work. Work and jobs are being separated from companies, and companies are becoming platforms. All right, so the construct of the traditional job is probably going to change right under our feet while we debate at this point. But the reality is it's changing. And it's also, we have to come to the realization that the smartest people probably don't work for you. And some of the leading companies in the world have opened up their platforms to strangers, corporate strangers, to say, well, we've got these problems. Why don't you come and play in our sandpit and solve problems for us? And these are companies like Lego, Volkswagen, General Electric, Coca-Cola has got some great case studies. Deloitte, my organization, is doing this as well. And we're getting phenomenal results. And also we're finding, bottom right side of the screen, that entrepreneurs are no longer fussing about being near where the money is. Entrepreneurs are establishing their businesses where they can achieve the best lifestyle. And then through transportation and the ease at which we travel around the world, which Niketa has shown us, you just go see your funders. But quality of life is certainly super important. So connected workforce ecosystems are very important. The connected workforce is another theme that's coming out very strongly. I don't know why it's not transitioning. There we go. I hope it's not going to transition a whole bunch now. There you go, back one. Connected workforce. I'm not talking about Slack, WhatsApps, emails, etc. I'm talking about an environment where the human is connected with the organization, and the organization is connected with the human on a real-time basis. You're constantly in sync with one another. And we've gotten used to checking how much money we're making, what's the performance of our plants, etc. But now the organization is going to start checking in on you. And looking at your effectiveness. And so we have at least 20% of organizations around the world are monitoring staff members already. And it's just a matter of time before your email server starts providing reports on the effectiveness of the meetings you're having. Are you having too many internal meetings and not enough client meetings, or too many client meetings and not enough internal meetings? And this is starting to define a thin red ethical line that we've seen recently with Amazon and Walmart, where Amazon wanted to monitor workers on a real-time basis, and then if they failed on the KPIs, they'd receive an SMS that says you're fired, right? And they've promised never to put that into action. So certainly something that we got to pay attention to. The next one is this construct of continuous learning. So the reality is there is no destination with learning. The learning is a crest of a wave. It's about continuously learning. It's about continuously refreshing your knowledge. Estimates are that at the current moment, your knowledge decays at 30% a year. So that deep experience, industry, years of decades in an industry, deep industry paradigms is probably your disadvantage in the workplace, potentially your blind spot that makes you less competitive when you want to develop your career and move around in the workplace. But without a doubt, there's a big focus on how we learn, and there's a great book, if you're interested in this, which is called Range, which says that perhaps and it's starting to show, that the most valuable skills at the moment are those where you combine an old world skill, relatively speaking, with a new world skill. So I'm a doctor that understands AI, an engineer that understands machine learning, a banker that understands one of these exponential technologies. And those are becoming the most valuable jobs, hybrid capabilities, where the fact that you're hybrid doesn't mean you're less specialized. It means that you've got deep knowledge in two different components. But there's also a view that it's not just about STEM, and everyone knows in the room what STEM is. It's about a thing called STEMpathy, right? Where you bring in this deep scientific and mathematical capabilities, but you don't forget the human side of it. And this is quite interesting. The green dots and the grey dots are jobs that have been created or that have remained flat and stagnant over the last couple of years. The blue ones are where we've seen a drop in jobs. Now, the y-axis is a demonstration of social skills. So what you realize is that jobs that require very low levels of social skills have been in decline, versus those that require high levels of social skills. What's quite interesting is if you have a look at accountants and bookkeepers, they match janitors in terms of social skills. All right, so it's quite not auditors, by the way. Auditors are slightly higher up, just in case, just for the auditors in the room. So this speaks about the importance. It speaks about the importance of the human element in the workplace. Finally, longevity, and this is quite an interesting thing. I'm always amazed how we are so fascinated by generational theory. I think it works if you live in New York or London or one of those amazing cities, or like the US or the UK. But in South Africa, generational theory I don't think applies. I think we've got multiple generations in the same age group. It depends on the conditions that you're born into, right? There's another thing is we're also fascinated by millennials. Without a doubt, millennials are the largest working cohort at the moment, but the fastest growing cohort around the world are the over 65s. Right? So the over 65s are not ready to retire. Right? The 65 of today is the 50-year-old of 30 years ago. And quite interesting, we talk about entrepreneurship. Without a doubt, over 90% of new startups are led by millennials. But the successful age range of successful startups is between the ranges of 45 and 55 years of age. And so why I mention this is that there's a view that if you're over 40, you've gone stale, you go out into the pastures, etc. It's not true. This is where you've got the greatest opportunity to contribute to this new future of work environment that is critical, specifically in an economy like ours where we need a lot of energy and a lot of push and a lot of revitalization. The final thing that I want to share with you is this construct of, and it's just slow again on the transition, sustainability. And it's not economic or environmental sustainability, it's social sustainability. It's about doing things in a responsible way. I refer to this as Nordic exceptionalism, speaking up, doing the right thing. And we're seeing instances where staff are taking the employers to task. We saw it with Google, we've seen it with Microsoft, etc., where they're not happy with the contracts that they've taken, and so they protest and they essentially put pressure on the employer to say, we're not happy with this, and if you continue, we're going to leave. So pick between your clients and the people you want to deal with or us. Okay, so certainly a high level of awareness. And this is the future of work conversations and trends that we are having in first world economies, in developed economies, in businesses such as those represented in this room, corporates, the big banks, insurance companies, energy companies in South Africa, etc. But as a South African executive, we've got a slightly more complex challenge. Not only do we have to ensure that our businesses remain globally competitive and contribute to the baseload of the South African economy, but we've got this problem as well. That we have got a huge chunk of the population that doesn't care about where they're going to work, how they're going to get the work done, and what technologies they're going to use. They want any kind of work. One that's going to put food on the table and do it in a dignified way. And the reality is that if we don't participate in solving this problem, then you might as well stop worrying about having a leading company in South Africa. because we'll have huge socioeconomic challenges in the coming years. And we're starting to see signs and symptoms of it. So let's unpack this. At the moment, just under 600 million people around the world living in extreme poverty. You add another 250 million people on top of that are underpaid, underemployed, working in unsafe or undignified conditions. So this is a serious number. But the good news is that people are escaping poverty at a rate of approximately 0.8 to 1 person every second. If you look at the top middle left of the screen. So it means the world's becoming a better place. People are escaping this poverty. We're behind the targets to achieve the SDG goals. We need to be escaping at 1.6 people a second. So we're doing half of it, but it's positive. Now, if I bring this back to South Africa, we are adding 7.3 people into poverty every hour. I'm going to say that again. 7.3 people are being added into poverty every hour. That number's jumped now. I think it's at 7.8 for the month of July. All right. So here's the thing, right? We've got 26% unemployment. We've got low productivity levels. The jobs that we've got in the country are at a high risk of automation. And we don't necessarily have the skills to modernize our economy. This is frightening stats, right? And then if we break this down slightly further, and it's just a bit slow. Here we go. We hold 0.8% of the world's population, but we hold 3.5% of the world's unemployed. And as you saw about a month ago, 2 months ago in time, we're now, again, the world's most unequal country. Now, how can this happen to an economy that we have been rated the second most effective economy at the world at globalizing businesses relative to the size of our economy, only second to South Korea? We've got the leading financial services market in the world in terms of the governance and controls that we have in place. We've got 2 Nobel Peace Prize winners, the only country in the world with 2 Nobel Peace Prize winners from the same street. The most progressive constitution in the world. How are we getting this wrong? Right. So the reality is that we can't sit in the richest square mile of Africa and not worry about this problem. We've got to play a role in fixing this. So I've cut this very, very quickly, but the reality is that if we unpack exponential technologies, everyone's fearful that these exponential technologies are going to take jobs away. They're wrong, right? There's views, and there's certainly one of my strong views, that if we prepare ourselves properly, that for every job we lose to automation and modernization, we're going to add 1.74 jobs to the economy, right? The challenge is that it's only people in this room that are going to benefit from those jobs. The privilege, the skill, those that have got access to education, etc. And this, these new jobs that we create, that some of them haven't been defined or invented yet, creates economic velocity, and it results in other jobs being created, the secondary and tertiary effects of these exponential technologies. But it doesn't help the unemployed, the unemployable, and those that are struggling at the moment. But what I am seeing around the continent, and this is where I get that sense of hope, is that there's a view, and there's a rise of what I refer to as the micro-entrepreneur. It's not the entrepreneur that invents the technology, but the entrepreneur that knows how to leverage the available technology and digital platforms to create jobs and self-sustainability. And I'm seeing it in places that I refer to 3 economic constructs. There's more, but these are the 3 that I tend to focus on. This construct of distributed value chains. This is to service people like us that are money rich and time poor, and we want to have great experiences, but in order for those experiences to be provided to us, it's not financially viable for large corporates. So they don't provide those experiences, or they exit out of those experiences, those components of the value chain. The second one is collaborative consumption, which says that as a poor person, I can't afford an asset. But if I get the community to participate with me, I can afford that asset, and because the community has got access to the asset, they've got the same benefit as owning the asset. And then finally, it's the revival of old industries that have gone flat. So using digital and modern technologies as the economic catalyst to revive industries that have lost their luster. And I want to unpack this with you for a second. So the first one is this construct of distributed value chains, where the corporate can't fulfill a gap, the micro-entrepreneur steps in to fill that gap. A very well-known company in the Northern Hemisphere, TaskRabbit, essentially looks, if you buy something from an IKEA store and you don't know how to assemble it, you find out who in your community has got spare time and spare skills to lend to you. or to borrow them to you, right? And so someone that wasn't working at the time can allocate time and get paid for assembling your furniture in your home. You've created a job, right? In South Africa, we're seeing companies like Illovo that have distributed the growing of the sugarcane to the communities. And this is a sugar company. The thing that's most important to the business, they've given away to the community. And now they're teaching the communities to become self-sustainable through growing sugar. We've got companies like Hey Jude. Who'd like a personal assistant? Who uses Hey Jude? Right? It's one of my favorite companies, right? Hey Jude, you pay $12 a month, equivalent of $12 a month, and you get a personal assistant. And it's not a machine. It's a person on the other side, coincidentally called Jude. That is always happy to hear from you, and they speak to you like they know you personally, right? We're creating jobs. They've gone off to the UK. They're now creating, I believe they're creating a Japanese Jude as well. And so this is creating phenomenal employment in the country. And then companies like Sweep South. And let me just unpack this a little bit further. DoorDash, a company that was recently acquired by Masayoshi Son of the Vision Fund. I think he paid over $350 million for this business. They're employing over 500,000 people around the world. And what this company does is hire individuals that go shop for you at a grocery store. You don't do things online. You go into the grocery store. So you sustain the local grocer, the local family that's running that store. They shop off the shelf, and they bring your groceries to your house. That's creating employment, and this company has created over 500,000 jobs. Companies like Sweep South, which is a proudly South African company, have created over 10,000 jobs with 90 million rands worth of investments, about $7 million. It's nothing. Right, so if you take a look at how effective they've been at creating jobs, they've been far more effective than our government in terms of the money spent at job creation. And the people that work for them earn more and work in a dignified and safe way. Some of them even have health benefits as a result of their employment through Sweep South. If I look at collaborative consumption, this is a sharing of assets, right? Now we will think of Uber straight away, etc. But it doesn't. I mean, we've moved on from that. And collaborative consumption doesn't have to be just for very old and basic economies. 3D hubs allows me to keep my 3D printer, which productive and earning money while I'm at the office. And so my community can mail stuff, blueprints to me. I print it for them while I'm away, while I'm at the office, and they'll come and collect it from my house for a fee. So my asset, a 3D printer, is generating income for me. It's not just a hobby toy. And if you move to the far side of the screen, to the left side of the screen, companies like Trotro and Hello Tractor are doing the same for small farmers. They're bringing automation onto farms and making farming far more predictable for farmers. Have a look at this.
Nigeria has one of the largest inventories of uncultivated farmland on earth. The majority of the poor earn their income on the farm, so I knew that's where I needed to meet them. Farmers don't have the labor they need or the machinery to fully cultivate this land. I started with collaborative consumption and the idea that a tractor is expensive and is necessary to make farmers productive. So if farmers have access to a tractor, that's as good as owning one. We designed a mobile app that allows smart tractor owners to view their machines remotely. They can assign operators to tractors, and they can see a full record of what their smart tractor did in the field. Despite Nigeria being the largest economy in sub-Saharan Africa, rural communities are suffering. Agriculture comes with so many risks and challenges. Technology can fill that gap. Ultimately, we're creating a model that can scale and sustain itself and reach, in my estimation, the entire continent.
So one of these companies, Trotro, has actually been incubated and funded out of a company that's based in Cape Town, and they're doing their work in Ghana. So these are practical examples of where you're changing the lives of farmers and improving their ability to employ additional people onto the farm and improve their productivity and predictability. Economic catalyst, this is quite an interesting one. Two great South African entrepreneurs, the guys behind Stockfella, that have digitized the concept of the Stockfell. So they brought trust, connectivity, transparency back to the Stockfell, phenomenal individuals, and a company called Livestock Invest. where the whole construct of lobola is very important in our culture. And so this was born from a situation where one of these entrepreneurs wanted to sell his cow and then found out that the cow had miraculously died the night before. So he decided, well, he's going to start this business where he can IoT the cow. And he can monitor his cow, doesn't matter where it is. And if he can't afford the full cow, he'll buy a portion of the cow. So he'll buy a front leg, a head, the back, etc., and go in partnership on the cow. And so we've taken old constructs and we've modernized them. A lovely one is the Fed group that allows me to own beehives and blueberry bushes. Right, so I provide the capital, the OPEX or the CAPEX for these farmers. They will farm the beehives, they'll farm my blueberry bushes, they'll package them, put them in containers, put them on a shelf, sell them, and give me dividends on the businesses that I've funded. So I'm creating employment by doing this. So it's very, very, it's amazing. Just last one, the guy on the far left side, this is an individual that's very close to my heart, a guy called Sifosiso and Nondumiso, which are a man and woman team, they're not a couple, that he specifically left a corporate job to go solve for illegal dumping. He's leveraging the IT technologies to identify illegal dumpsters that essentially take rubble and garden refuse from the rich homes of Sandton, and instead of taking it to a rubbish dump, take it to one of the local informal settlements and dump it there because they don't have to pay for it, and the kids get sick and injure themselves, etc. So he was following, essentially, I would give him the money to have rubble collected from my property, and he would drive behind the rubble collectors and then take photographs that they were dumping their rubble at the rubbish site. But what would happen is they would stop him, beat him up, break his cell phone, etc., so he couldn't report back to me that they hadn't dropped off the rubble in the right place. So now we're using IT technologies to track where the rubble goes and to prevent illegal dumping. And this is becoming hopefully will become a thriving business where he can get the community involved in addressing the problem, start generating proper employment, etc. He was recently featured on Red Bull Channel around the work that he's doing in Johannesburg. So as I wrap up, right, I'm far more optimistic or less dystopian, let me put it that way, about the future of work than what most populist views are, because I do think that we can solve the competitiveness of our first world economy businesses and at the same time address the unemployment challenges that we have in our country. We've got to change we have to have a slight mind shift change, which says that perhaps the new form of employment is self-employment, and perhaps it's not going to come from the corporates. But in order to get to this utopian mindset or world that I speak to, it's not going to be done through entrepreneurs working on their own or government working on their own or big business working on its own. There has to be collaborative action and deliberate action that is required from the various role players. From simple things, harmonizing policies so that the policies are business friendly, focusing on education. And I'm not just saying the traditional teach people to code. I think that's important, yes, but we need shorter interventions. We need programs to teach entrepreneurs critical skills, thinking, resilience, the ability to articulate, the ability to leverage these digital platforms to create businesses, etc. And we also need to teach these entrepreneurs to become far more resilient, incentivize corporates to work with these entrepreneurs, etc. So with that, I'm going to thank you for your time and hope that you can take some of these messages back into your businesses. Thank you.